So I've taken a long position for EU at 1.1111, going long after price took out the sell side liquidity, came into the next fair value gaps 50% level and found support with this bullish candle. It's the fact that price arrives down to that level with this sharp bearish candle after a small pullback, especially after the news. And I've been anticipating price to come up to these buy side liquidity at these highs, and the fact that price closed below the initial swing right there during the news and failed to hold these fair value gaps, and then came down to the sell side liquidity and has come into the first fair value gap. I've gone and traded aggressively, most likely to somewhere into this midpoint of this range, 50% off that range, or at the start of this previous support level. Let's just see how that plays out. And also we have SMT with GU at the same time. There you go, GU failed to make a lower low at the same time, whereas euro dollar made a lower low. So I'll be watching. Maybe we'll come down to the second fair value gap and find support, and then I'll re-enter again. So after I entered that trade, price started to push down lower into a higher time frame POI, which is clearer on the 60-minute, which I'll show in a second. Yeah, it comes into the second fair value gap on this range, and then finds support at that lowest level, which also is the inverse fair value gap that pushed price bullish after this low that took out liquidity looking left. So yeah, I mean, I took the entry at the first fair value gaps 50%, which was slightly aggressive, and I was waiting for that one hit stop because I had my stops there, and then I was waiting for the second one's 50% to be hit. But the way it came down, it was not the way that I wanted price. I wanted to see price come down to that level because I had my stop down there. It was the next candle that took me out, and didn't really like the way price came down, and then price found support at that low. And this was something interesting because I didn't want to take a trade towards the end of that session, towards the end of London session, but after making that low, price pushed up. I was waiting for some kind of a market structure shift for price to push down and then market structure shift, but instead of that, we made a low, and then we took liquidity off that low, and then we got that market structure shift right there, and then we pulled back into the 50% of that fair value gap into this order block, and then price found the support that I was looking for. And then by then it's too late for me to look for any trades. However, there was trade on this pullback, clearer on the 15-minute time frame into this order block. So we had a order block here, and then we had another order block here, which also lines up with that 50% of that fair value gap that I entered at. And this comes between the 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock, so 7:30, 8, which is 12 UK time, half one UK time, between 12 and half one, which is the peak manipulation time before price continues in its intended direction. So for me, I was still bullish. I was still expecting price to continue higher, and this would have been a good entry, but it's not something I fully understand well, so I wasn't going to enter that trade. This one, however, is something I should be more aware of, especially because we had the market structure shift, failed retest, right, liquidity grab, and then a market structure shift, and entering on the pullback should be something that I need to be taken into consideration. But this one also, but it's not really something that I know because price has already made that move that I wanted to see, and then we continue to consolidate sideways and then find resistance out. During New York, London close probably at the 50% of this fair value gap. Nope, not at that 50%, but at this previous support, which turned into resistance, right? And then we'll see how price reacts going into tomorrow. So this is how EU played out on Wednesday. It reached that buy side liquidity on the daily time frame that I was anticipating price to reach the whole week, and we found quite a strong resistance there on Wednesday so far. Because the crazy thing for me is, man, fucking hell, like my direction was correct. I was predicting price to come up to these buy side liquidity, especially this one first. I was in the right zone in terms of, you know, fair value gaps. I was watching this fair value gap and this fair value gap. I entered on the first, stopped out, and I told myself I would enter on the second. I didn't, because, well, I took a stop and I just was not ready to take another target, another entry. And then price just pushes up and hits my drawn liquidity. But regardless, there was this order block on the weekly time frame. That was something that obviously I wasn't watching, and it's something that I can make a note of. We had that order block, right, which also lines up with the fair value gap on the 1 hour time frame, and the inverse fair value gap as well. If you look at this inverse fair value gap, right, so price comes down, taps into that 50% of that inverse fair value gap, and then that the low of that into that order block, and then find support. So ideally I should be waiting for price to come to at least, you know, this level, put stops below these lows, and then target these highs, or if not that, at least take an entry, because on the 5 minute we had a really good entry of a market structure shift right there as price came and held that order block on the weekly time frame, and then we pushed up, right? Even if I was just taking a short-term trade there, that should be something that I should be watching out for the weekly order blocks. And then next day we had another trading opportunity, but because price came and took out this high first, I was quite hesitant on looking for any trades. So after trading off that order block on the weekly time frame, these inverse fair value gaps, price came in, held this bullish fair value gaps 50%, right, during London session. Let me just go back into London session quickly. Yeah, during Asian session, and then market structure shift, pulled back, held that one more time, and then we came out and took these highs, which is one reason that I stopped looking for trades. And then on Tuesday, yep, we came back down, held that fair value gap one more time, that 50% tapped into, and then price continued higher. And then since yesterday, we just made our way up all the way back to that, all the way to that buy side liquidity. Good trade, just early entry, and missed trade at the low right there.